There's another way for us to evolve our consciousness, and that is what I want to provide for humanity. Well, how do we do that? This is how we do it. I am is the only statement that is ever actually correct. Anything you put after I am is a temporary experience, and therefore that's proof that it's not you. The ego mind is disconnected from the source of all things. It is the only obstacle to manifest as we desire. Enlightenment has to do with how sentient we actually are. The sentience plus the energy is what it really means to be created in God's image. We're going to the source point, the one true concrete reality that gives birth to all other realities. If we can be present, we're going to be able to experience the depth and the richness of ourselves and whatever experience we're having. That is when everything will change overnight. The greatest wealth, my friend, is in wanting nothing. All of us want a challenge. All of us are incredibly courageous. We never give ourselves enough credit because we're conditioned to acquire and become. Be the seeker. Don't. Stop now. And reverse that process. Here's the easiest way to reverse it. Well, this will be very controversial and quite upsetting. The only mandate of existence, Amrit, is to know thyself. And we do that through. The EMI is the only obstacle to self-realization and self-healing, and the ability to manifest as we desire. So the EMI is the ego, mind, identity. It is the fake character. It is the false self, the inauthentic self. It is the combination and summation of all the electromagnetic interference, ego, mind, identity, that we have misaligned ourselves with. Beliefs, concepts, ideologies, roles, experiences, so-called knowledge, bodily sensations. If you add all those together, Amrit, it is literally the false character, and it is literally, and it doesn't even exist because, as you know, if you just question it, it just disappears. So it's the only block, and it's completely imaginary. It's the only block that prevents self-healing, self-realization, and the manifestation of our highest desires, as well as full communion. Speaking of access superconsciousness, full communion with the higher mind of the higher self. It is literally our false character. And people have asked me many times, RJ, what is healing? It's the deconstruction of the false self. What is self-realization? It's the deconstruction of the false self. So to know thyself, self-realization. So the ego, mind, identity, Amrit, is our human character, who we think we are, how we feel about ourselves, and then we vibrate within that frequency, and that's what we emanate, and that's the reality that we create for ourselves. And it's about 0.003 of the depth and power of who and what we really are.
Because it threw me for a curveball coming into today's conversation, because there's a point, well, not just for today's conversation, RJ, you threw me into an existential crisis. It was, I say that jestingly, it was, at some point, it's all the questions come from the EMI, and none of the questions are going to get you any closer to capital T truth. I read that and I reread that and I reread that, and I started to really gestate in what you were trying to communicate there, or what you were communicating there. Unpack that for us, because this EMI concept, like you said, 0.003%, then the depth to which the book takes us is some really profound places.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Amrit. So most of us, the egoic mind, all questions come from the egoic mind. And so we're kind of driven at the behest of that ego mind. So the ego mind is disconnected from the source of all things. And so it's outwardly focused and disconnected from the I am, which is why it's ravenous for more and more information, because it doesn't authentically know anything. Now, the real, and we can all just let that land for a second. Now, the real issue is that even though the egoic mind is grasping with questions, the real key is to not search for answers in terms of the questions, but to question the questioner, to actually go in the other direction. So instead of having these questions and then looking outward for answers, question the questioner. because it's the false character is the one that has the question. So as soon as you start to question the questioner, the ego mind identity or the false character is seen for what it is, a total illusion. And once we start to recognize that and realize that, the questions will actually cease and we'll start to get in direct communion with the source of all knowingness, or the source of truth, the self with the capital S. And the self with the capital S doesn't have any questions. It simply likes to have experience by creating experiences. It doesn't have any questions whatsoever. So we often chase down the answer, or try to chase down the answer when we have a question. If we actually do the opposite and question the questioner, our life changes overnight.
Okay, so from there, let's open up into what is actually the iceberg. And in there, because there's this key thing around content and context that I keep coming back to, even just in behavioral psychology terms. And the content is what I'm hearing is like, yeah, that's all false. But then when you zoom out, and the context, RJ, that you afford us, we're going to get into some of those places today, and even then we'll just be scratching the surface, I'm sure of it. But when we zoom out on when it comes to context, the I am, can you describe the I am a little bit? And I've got some questions around there.
Okay, so the I am is actually what we are. That is the fractal of God. It is our level, amount, or weight of our love and wisdom, whose subsets are our talents and abilities. That is what the I am is. That is what God is. Now, that I am is given energy in order to create with. And that's the energy that actually makes up our physical body. And that's also the energy that makes up our more subtle bodies of energy that we use to think, to emote, to animate the body, and therefore make the body have these experiences. Now, the sentience plus the energy, we are the sentience, the I am, plus the energy is what it really means to be created in God's image. That is exactly what God is. God is sentience, love and wisdom, whose subsets are talents and abilities, that has also been given energy in order to create. And we are a tiny, tiny fractal of that, a cell of that, a microcosm of the macrocosm. So the I am is the self with the capital S. And that's actually what we are. And that's what uses energy in order to create, in order to learn more about the I am or the self.
And so the whole point of existence is to experience.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone is immortal. So what does an immortal, complete, whole, perfect being want to do with all of its eternity at its hands? A multitude of experiences, endless experiences. So it can learn about itself through what it is that it creates in terms of the experiences that it creates for itself. So the only mandate of existence, Amrit, is to know thyself, self-realization, to know thyself and all thy infinite potential. Now, contained within that is that it's never ending, infinite potential. So it's never finished or accomplished. It's just this ongoing exploration to know this infinite aspect, this pure potential, this endless potential of what it is that the I am, God, can create. So our mandate at all existence is to know thyself, self-realization. And we do that through endless experiences, human experience, alien experience, parallel conditions, anything that you can actually think of, and even what you can't think of. But the point is just endless experiences, because we're all immortal, and there's no end point. There's no beginning point and there's no end point, which the finite mind can't work with that, because the finite mind sees things as a beginning or an end, good or bad, right or wrong. We're talking about what gives birth to beginnings and endings. We're going way before that. Yeah.
It's really interesting because you also mentioned, like, in the book you're discussing at certain points reincarnation and like how we're birthed, and this goes back to that context piece. Like we're birthed and we're in this cycle of reincarnation, and we come and we go and we wear different meat suits and identities. But then you invite us in maybe it was even in a particular meditation, really cool meditations, by the way. Yeah, to contemplate the beginnings of beginnings and the endings of endings. Can you describe that a little bit further? What are you bringing us to in that space?
We're going to the source point, the one true concrete reality that gives birth to all other realities. So by being able to sit within, as, for, and by the true self, the I am, we are seated at the driver's seat of the miracle machine. And from there, we can actually create and experience anything because it's the 0 point, it's the source point, it's the fractal of God that we all are. And the book and the 12 eternal truths and the 12 tenets of self-mastery and then the 24 accompanying meditations are all designed to, in a very short period of time, to bring us right back to that source point of who, and it's not even a who, bring us back to that source point of what we are. And from there, we can actually tangibly experience our divinity, our completeness, our fullness, our compassion, our love, our power. And from there, we can actually create anything that we actually truly desire to be the awareness of. And so everything is designed to bring us to the I am, to the self, the capital S, to the miracle machine. And from there, we live, we love, we create. And that's what the superhuman is that.
It's really profound to think about just how much is available in that I am space. And like you said, it's the zone of miracles. It's where miracles emerge from. And even just the at the risk of sounding cheesy, just how incredibly special it is to have a human incarnation and have a human experience, to be able to look in and experience oneself in this way, because it could be having any kind of experience, like just literally any kind of experience, and yet somehow this is what existence is feeling like at the moment. And we'll talk a little bit more about existence, but that in alone is just, it feels like such a gift. And yet, like, I get why some people think it's totally random. Do you know what I mean?
It's the funny thing is it's like literally the polar opposite of random. Things are so worked out meticulously on a level that our human mind can't even understand. Incarnation, human incarnation and alien incarnation into the lower frequencies. There's two things really behind this, Amrit. One is incarnation into the lower frequencies, because it's so difficult, acts as an accelerant for the evolution of consciousness because of the degree of difficulty, right? So if we watch like high diving, right, the Olympics or whatever, so someone is at that high dive and they do a swan dive, right? So even if they do it perfectly, they're not going to get a 10 because that dive's too easy. It's just easy to master a swan dive, right? Okay. So they get a 7.5, a 7, because it's a swan dive. Someone goes up there and does triple backwards somersault flip, right? All this action going on, and they do a really good job with that. That's a 9 or 9.5 because of degree of difficulty. Now that athlete is getting better and better and honing their talents and abilities by giving themselves a difficult dive to master. So you can think of incarnating into the lower frequencies as just that. Because it's so difficult, we are afforded the challenges and obstacles that are inherent within so-called physical reality, which then hones our skills and our abilities and our talents. It deepens our love. It strengthens our will, which is the very fiber of our existence itself, which makes us more pliable under any circumstance. So it's a degree of difficulty, it's an accelerant of the evolution of consciousness. And it's also available to us. We take it because it is available, because it is a possibility. And because we're eternal and immortal, we really want to avail ourselves. And we do. of every possible experience that is out there. And incarnation, a human incarnation, was one of those many things that we avail ourselves of. And you're absolutely right. It's a total gift, an absolute gift. And just to add to that for 1 second is that one incarnation, Amrit, is so exquisite and so valuable. And we have to look at it from the higher mind perspective. So every time we have a choice in our life, and we're going to move to New York or we're going to move to California, right? And then you choose to, well, I'm going to move to New York. And so that reality for you within your conscious mind is that you went to New York. Well, there's also a version of you that went to California, because existence is conscious. And if there's an opportunity for existence itself to evolve itself, it will take advantage of every single opportunity. And when there's a choice, that means there's energy behind both of those things. And because there's energy behind both, they both come to fruition. Now, we may not experience the version of ourselves that moves to Los Angeles, but the higher self experiences it, and it is recorded, and we learn from that. So one single incarnation will contain millions, if not billions, of parallel conditions, and the sentience, the love and wisdom that we accrue from one lifetime and all these different parallel conditions. This is really what the tree of life is. So when we hear about the tree of life, the main trunk is our planned out or life plan, right? That's our main trunk. Okay. But if we look at a tree, right, we got all these branches going out in all these different directions. Okay. Those are all the parallel conditions. Those are all the choices that we are making. And so the tree of life is all of this knowledge, wisdom, experience, love, talents, and abilities that we accrue through one single lifetime. It's immeasurable. It's almost incalculable. And to be gifted with just a single human incarnation is such an accelerant for the evolution of the higher self, ourself, and consciousness itself, that if we start to look at it this way and treat it this way, I think all of us are going to get a lot more out of every moment. And there's one other thing we can put in our back pocket. Everything gets covered. We don't have to regret that we didn't do this or we didn't do that, because I got news for you. We did. We did do this and we did do that. We're just not consciously aware of it. So every single possible possibility gets availed, and we learn from every single one of them in just one single lifetime.
Hey there, guys. We're about to dive in super deep on this episode. Just before we get there, I would invite you to please take a moment to hit subscribe to the channel. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. Thank you so much to all of you that are subscribed to the channel. I cannot thank you enough for your incredible love and support. RJ is about to get super deep in this episode. Brace yourself. Back to the episode. I'm going to ask you a few questions at once, if that's okay for you to speak to, because there's always a question that emerges for me in feeling into what you're sharing there, which is, how are we tethered to this particular potential timeline? And also in the book you mentioned, and I do want to talk about cities, so I'm hoping I'm not jumping around the place too much, but you also mentioned that we're at a point right now where we're like there's a distortion because of the confliction in timelines actually that's going on. And so how are we tethered to this particular realm of possibility when infinite possibilities are consistently opening up with maybe even every single choice that's ever made? And then also, what do you mean by the different, well, we're understanding now of the different timelines, but then also the distortions and the combat between them?
Yeah, so we we experience whatever it is that we are in frequential resonance with, and therefore what we most desire to experience. So however we're feeling, it's not quite specific enough, but I'll use the word feeling. However we're feeling, that will be based upon that will be what we reach out for in terms of an experience that's matching that in frequency. So in other words, as just a tangible human example, if we're feeling really down, on ourselves, beating ourselves up, very depressed, that's when we often reach out for things that are probably not the healthiest choices, whether that's an interaction with someone. We start to partake of things that's matching that frequential resonance. So we actually move and make choices based upon our frequential resonance. And so therefore, that's how we move through, we'll say, these different timelines, these different conditions, these different parallel conditions. It's always based upon that. Now, the issue arises in that we are greatly affected by those around us, most immediate, and then it also by a little further out, and then a little further out, and then a little further out. So now we definitely co-create every experience that we have, but there's no question about this, that if we're around, let's just say our family and friends, let's say they're operating in a very different way than we are, and you're around them, that frequency is going to affect your ability to move through whatever it is that you want to move through. In that sense, they are, I'll use it that they're operating in a low frequency way. They could be operating in a high frequency way, and you're operating in a low frequency way. But for most people that are going to be watching this, they're probably most likely trying to operate or are operating in a high frequency way. But we are affected by the people around us, the local environment, and it makes it more difficult. So this is where we get this issue with timelines in terms of where it is that we're going, because we have some people really moving, let's say working with themselves in a high level way. It's very generic, but working with themselves in a high level way. And then there's others that are not working with themselves in that kind of level, or maybe lower, or even much lower, or in a very low way. So this is where we get this kind of mashup where things can, because it's a collective concept, which means it's kind of one thing, but we have these temporary individuals, and then groups of individuals, and then larger groups of individuals operating in a certain way, and it affects everything. So the more disparate, the more divided, that you can make the collective consciousness, the greater chance you have of subverting them into various different timelines. So now let that land, and now you're starting to see what's going on. That's part of the reason for this. It's easier to manipulate a timeline based upon having all these different factions operating in all these different ways, keeping us from just in a steady, robust way of ascending the frequencies. So that's where that static can come from, which is really evolutionary tension. Evolutionary tension is the pressure that we feel, so that we can't just sort of skyrocket. So if you can get various groups of people, endless groups of people, to operate in endless ways, various ways of low frequency ways, it's going to make it much, much more difficult to jump to the highest timeline.
Because there is also this really trippy thing called the Mandela effect. Have you come across this?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And it blows my mind that even in, like, because most of what you're describing when initially was, I think people can sort of digest is like, hey, if I'm not feeling good, I see the world a certain way. But then there's like certain experiences where people are reporting objective reality behaving differently based on, and based on, that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, for me, it's like, that really is very trippy. Certain people believe that, Nelson Mandela became the president, and all this amazing stuff happened. Certain people believe he was locked in prison and died in prison. And it's like, on the same earth plane frequency, different stories are mapping out and different timelines are playing out. And that starts to feel really trippy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's an image or an analogy, because I like analogies. Okay. So do you remember when you used to blow bubbles? Right? You may still blow bubbles, Amrit, on this, right? So you remember?
I got a 3-year-old, so I'm blowing bubbles.
Right. Okay. So, and I remember doing this, right? So you blow bubbles right now. But if we look at that for a second, those bubbles are often stuck together, right? And they're sharing a membrane, right? And you get that clump of bubbles. Okay. So they're all in the same space, and they're all influencing one another. And so sometimes that membrane bleeds in a little bit more than another one. And so we start to experience what we could call a parallel condition or an alternate reality. And it's actually kind of seeping in because it's sharing a membrane. So the veil is so thin because it's sharing, just like the bubble, it's sharing that one thing. So it's right there. So it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm experiencing that, but I'm not. I'm experiencing this, but it's right in front of us. It's an analogy. But because all possible possibilities are right here, right now, some of them are going to be sharing a membrane, if you will, especially if there's people are thinking and behaving in a similar way, and they will experience that reality because they're co-creating it. And then there'll be other people that are thinking and behaving and emoting in a slightly different way, and they won't experience that reality. They'll experience the reality that they're co-creating, but they're all in the exact same space, and they share that membrane, and they're influencing one another, and they're in the exact same space. So for me, maybe that's an easier way to kind of see or understand the Mandela effect.
Can you help me reconcile? Because many people, thank you for explaining that. Many people say the Earth plane is an Earth school, like it's a school. And yet, when I come to your work, it feels like it's just here. We're here to experience. School has there's a couple of things that needed reconciling there for me.
Yeah. Okay. So, and when people say that, I mean that's fine. It's an analogy. Okay. But if we start to understand variance, so our God, and we are in the multiversal structure of one specific God, and we are within that God because that structure is within God. Okay. So our God decided to create using variance rather than homogenization, rather than making everything exactly the same. Our God did literally the exact opposite. So, what does that mean? Okay, it means that there's various, endless levels of sentience and energy. So, in other words, the sentience and energy that is you, Amrit, is certainly not the same level of sentience and energy that is a slug or a tree or a rock, or right. We don't have to go on and on. We already get the picture. So it's endless variance, right? Okay. Now think of high school, right? High school is a blending of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. Not all freshmen, not all seniors, right? So again, we have this blending. So it's called a school because we have these various levels of sentience within it. And the idea is to graduate in the sense that once there's nothing to learn from these low frequency, from being incarnated into the lower frequencies of the physical universe, in that sense, you graduate from having to keep coming back, because once you graduate high school, you don't take ninth grade English again because there's really nothing for you to learn, right? Okay. So this is why I say it, it's okay to call it that, but the other thing, the aspect I think that is not probably totally tangibly understood, is that we're all already perfect. We're all a fractal of God. No one is missing anything. No one is lacking anything. No one is better than anyone else. No one is more special than anyone else. It's all one thing. We're all part of the whole, and therefore nothing special. That's the absolute truth. Now, the idea behind incarnation is actually to become self-realized, and you don't have to do it again. And the data points that we have in our lifetime, meeting certain people, having certain experiences, massive illnesses, or all these different things. The real purpose of those data points, Amrit, is to be like an energetic bucket of cold water in the face, and to wake up and to realize who and what you really are. That's actually the point. The point was never to do this over and over and over and over again. So to come back what you said, I mean, we can call it a school, but we're already perfect. What we're doing is deepening our reservoir of unconditional love and timeless wisdom. So if we can think of a time-lapse camera, right? Because we are this immortal, untouched, unsullied, pristine awareness of everything that is going on. Now, a time-lapse camera is not affected by what it views. Say like the change of seasons. Let's just say it's watching the change of seasons. Right? We've watched those. I used to love watching those videos. So the time-lapse camera is just watching everything. It's completely unaffected by it all. But here's the magic. We are like that time-lapse camera, but through all these endless experiences, our appreciation, our compassion, our forgiveness, our power, our love deepens through witnessing and experiencing endless timelines and variations. So the time-lapse camera is unaffected, but its I am, its sentience is deepening. It's accruing. So in that sense, it's not a school. We're all perfect. But in another sense, I'm giving two answers, how annoying. In another sense, we are evolving, and it doesn't make sense. Well, if you're perfect, then what do you mean that we're evolving? We are perfect, but we're just deepening. We're deepening that level of love and wisdom. So if we could kind of put those two things together, that's why I said, yeah, we could call it a school, but at the same time, it's not, because we're already perfect. But we are that time-lapse camera by witnessing and experiencing these things endlessly. There's just the love, the compassion, these things just, they start to get engaged, and it deepens through everything that it witnesses. And that is really the evolution of consciousness. It's actually that.
Sometimes this happens at home where, because I've got little kids, or maybe not, I don't need to make an excuse for it, but I've got like a 6-month-old, a 3-year-old, and I'll chuck the washing on and we forget to put it out. And the cycle goes for about 45 minutes and then I forget to put it out. And then 2.5 hours later, I'm back staring at the washing machine and I'm like, oh, it's a bit, I think I need to run that again now, because it's, you know how like if you leave it in the washing machine, it gets a bit funky. So you're like, oh, just no soap, but I might have to run that one again. So I'll run it again. And, God forbid, let's just say, 3 hours later, I come back and it's like, oh, I forgot to put the washing out again. Like I'm illustrating a point. It doesn't usually happen that many times, but it's kind of the visual that's dropping in for me with us coming back again and again to do these lessons or these experiences, I should say, lessons, experiences, take your pick. You mentioned that the point actually to like the cold bucket of water in the face, to wake up, to not go another round in the washing machine. Mm-hmm. How does one actually practically go about ejecting themselves out of the washing machine?
Oh, it's a great question. Okay. For me, from my perspective, Amrit, it is our ability to be fully present and not have the conditioned, brainwashed, traumatized, MK Ultra mind running, right? Okay. So if we can be present, we're going to be able to experience the depth and the richness of ourself and whatever experience we're having. And you can kind of also now see how that's flow. We're now one with everything, right? So when we operate like that, that's the greatest efficacy of the evolution of consciousness possible, is to simply be completely and utterly present. Now, the problem arises, from my perspective, is that we are conditioned to figure everything out mentally, right? We go about our day trying to figure everything out. That's the actor performing an action. That's the totally, completely, and utterly bankrupt finite mind who's trying to balance out its eternal ignorance with something to memorize. Okay, now when we make this shift, and this is a big, for me, this is one of the major hurdles I would like to see the so-called spiritual community start to switch. So instead of just endlessly taking in information, so again, ego mind, taking in information, if we stop trying to figure things out mentally because it's pointless, because we're not our thoughts, if we switch the goal from trying to figure everything out mentally to how present can we be throughout the day, that is when everything will change overnight. It's that simple switch, not mentalizing everything, but how present we can be, because when we're present, the I am is online. All of our love, wisdom, compassion, talents, abilities, and power is now online. Now the best of us, what we really are, is here now. And that puts us in communion, in connectivity, flow state, to what it is that we're doing, whether it's with our spouse, our kids, our business, what does it matter? It's perpetual flow state. So if we're experiencing the self, not this, because we're not our thoughts, so it's pointless. So if we keep experiencing ourself perpetually, what's right around the corner? Self-realization is what's right around the corner. So is joy. So is the highest quality of life. So is the most happiness. So is the most compassion, forgiveness, creative powers. It's this simple switch from stop the agenda of trying to figure everything out. You're not your thoughts. It's never going to change a thing. It's never going to change a thing. But by being present, you will change everything, because now what you're experiencing is yourself. And then you'll be able to experience directly. You'll have the connectivity and the communion with everything and everyone when we're present.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing. And Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. There's 24 different examples of, 24 different, I want to call them experiences, experiments, they're meditations. That doesn't really quite do them justice though. Can you share with us the one about the periscope? Because I think that fits in right where we are in this conversation really well. That's one that's really stayed with me since practicing it. Can you please describe the periscope and the meditation that's around there? You don't have to guide us into it, but just describe the setup and what and maybe use that as a metaphor, please.
Yeah. That, by the way, that's also has always been one of my favorites favorites too. I find myself almost experiencing that, and I go, oh yeah, I teach that. So anyway, so if we look at it this way, so most of us are familiar with a periscope, right? So it's kind of like a viewfinder, binoculars, right? However you want to call that. There's nothing behind it though. So what I want us to understand, it's pure awareness, right? A periscope, but there's no computer behind it, right? There's no brain behind it, right? It's pure awareness, unsullied, untainted, untouched, time-lapse camera type awareness, unsullied. Okay. Now there's nothing behind that periscope. The one who's viewing it is the captain, way down deep in the hull of the ship. Now we are the periscope. We have confused ourselves in thinking that consciousness is in the brain because we have the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth. It's all centered in one thing, but it's just a viewfinder. Even when we're incarnate, and especially when we're incarnate, the one who's looking through this thing is seated between the heart and the spine. And there's nothing going on behind this. All the wisdom and all the love is right down here. Now, if we kind of just let ourselves feel that for a second, just like there's no musicians in your radio, it's just picking up wavelength. That's what this thing does. It just picks up the sensory data from the 5 physical senses and scrambles it and then projects out a reality. But the one who's viewing this is down here. Now, when you let yourself feel that, watch how the thought process just stops. And we go back into that unsullied awareness. We could call it observer, but it's not good enough. It's more than the observer. It's awareness, and behind that screen of pure awareness, actually woven into that screen, is our depth of love and wisdom. It's automatically built in there, and it doesn't require thinking. Thinking actually stops the process. Thinking is actually the conditioned, brainwashed, MK Ultra traumatized mind. That's what the thinking is. By just being the pure awareness, the periscope, by what you see, your own depth of love and wisdom is automatically online. No thinking required.
Thank you so much for sharing that. At this particular point in the conversation, it becomes apparent that we're not all this noise. And I love how it's called ego, mind, identity, and then you call it electromagnetic interference as well. I think now it starts to make a little bit more sense for those that are tuning into the conversation. And I just want to take a quick sec because I do think something tangible to take away is also really important to just take time out. Most of the people tuning into these conversations are tuning in from cities. The book has certain points where it's very practical, and you've lived in various different cities. And it sort of becomes time where it's time to move on. I'm front loading your answer, but yeah, can you describe a little bit around the electromagnetic interference and how cities tend to be a denser sort of environment and how to navigate that, and also the importance of sort of taking yourself out so the periscope can just sort of not have to do this thing that it does. Yeah.
Wherever there's a density of population, which is typically a city, right? The frequency is lower. So, and that's a standalone. So we just let that understand. So wherever there's lots of people, because in general, because of the way that our body is attuned to and part of the local environment, which is very low frequency. The programming, what passes for world culture, is extremely low frequency, right? It's always
you do
matter.
have a pretty good, you do have a pretty good go at world culture actually in the book, don't you?
Yes. So, because from a very detached perspective, there's clarity there, and then you can kind of see. I mean, it's just consumerism. I mean, what's happened? The matrix, whatever word you want to use, right? We become a consumer rather than a creator, and that's if we can actually see that and let that land and really start to take that in, that's what this is about. So I call it perception management. I think that's in the book. It's in one of the books. Okay. So perception management. So in other words, if what is available to our five physical senses, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we taste, what we smell, if that's heavily managed, then you will completely and utterly control the minds of that species. If that species is only reducing itself to body consciousness, which is the five physical senses, and therefore the data stream that comes in is what forms the intellect. So if that, again, from my perspective, if that is very low frequency, what's being put out there, then you're going to have a very low frequency world culture. Everything is going to be about consumerism. Instead of creating, instead of going within and creating from your true self, we are adopting the desires born of personhood that are programmed into our mind through what we call, what passes for, world culture. And many of us might not have seen it that way, but I'll give an example of this, a real world example. I'm sure, because I've done this too, I'm sure at some point we set out, we had a desire. Maybe that desire was to finally own a house, or to buy a car, to have $100,000, right? Just to pick something. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? And then we spend all this energy, all this time, sometimes years, right? Going after this thing, going after it, right? And then if we're fortunate, it happens, right? And we make that money, we get that car, we get that house, we get that partner, right? And then once it's been achieved, there's this empty, just completely and utterly empty feeling to it. It's like, that's because that desire is not germane to you. That's why it feels so empty and meaningless. That's a desire that was programmed in through what passes for world culture. And then as soon as we actually have the manifestation of that desire, it feels empty. And what does the ego mind do? Okay, what's next? Right? So that's kind of an example. We've all done that. We've all absolutely done that. So we want to work the other way. We want to have the desire. And desire is not the enemy. Desire born of personhood will cause suffering. Desire born of the I am will unleash our creative powers and our ability to share all of our love and wisdom and talents and abilities, and therefore create the reality that we truly desire. But only if the desire is coming from our true self. And the way to know the difference is in, once you are working towards it or you have achieved it, if it feels completely hollow and empty, there is your proof that that desire actually has nothing to do with you. It's been programmed in, and that's how you know.
Yeah, I remember reading in the book that the only measure of success is normalizing the I am state. And I was like, I really sat with that one for for a very long time. Yeah, because there's an infinite amount of just structure that's required and contemplation that we can sit with, but then also, like, back to the periscope, like there's this concept of seeking. There's, like, even when we try to intellectualize the conversation we're having, there's this perpetual seeker. And I think back to what you were saying about the spiritual community at large, we pride ourselves on our seeking. We identify as seeker, and yet the invitation is experiencer. You know, and I hear that, and it's like, experience it, and it's like,
yeah. It's to realize the self-realization that has nothing to do with thoughts, right? So all the seeking in the world, even performed by the greatest of intellects, can never actually have the experience of the I am, or have the experience of what gave birth to it, because the I am precedes and exceeds seeking itself. And so when we let that land, we realize that we are already it. And the seeking is what takes you out of alignment, right? So the seeking is the actor performing an action. That is your character. That is your ego, mind, identity, right? Reaching and grasping for something outside of itself. Meanwhile, the I am, the divinity, the perfection, the wholeness and completeness actually is already there and precedes the seeking. So when we, again, everything is backwards here. So this is and by the way, that's the point, right? When we talked about happiness, right? Okay. It's designed to be backwards because that's the great challenge, right? It's not a swan dive. That ain't going to cut it, right? Being here where all of us are, that's the backwards triple somersault flip, right? So all of us want a challenge. All of us are incredibly courageous. We never give ourselves enough credit. We never give ourselves enough credit because we're conditioned to acquire and become. Be the seeker, acquire and become. Don't. Stop. Stop now. And reverse that process. And realize the wholeness and completeness that you always have been, that you are right now, and that you forever will be. All of our efforting and seeking only takes us out of alignment into the electromagnetic interference. That's all it ever does. So if we can reverse that, here's the easiest way to reverse it from my perspective. We all know what it's like to give ourselves permission to relax physically. We sit down, we lie down, right? Okay. What if we all just gave ourselves permission to relax mentally and emotionally? And just stay there. And start to realize that that state of being doesn't lack anything, doesn't have to acquire anything, doesn't have to become anything, because it's already it. And when that is normalized, self-realization is around the corner. The greatest wealth, my friend, is in wanting nothing. And when we let that start to become a tangible truth, the seeking is over. The seeking is over. What happens is tangible truth. And then this guy who's, just gone. And that's why, for me, all the everything that I write and teach, everything is prescriptive, as you know. So like, here's this, the context or the teaching, right? Here's these broad strokes, right? Okay, I understand mentally, which is worth nothing. Here's a meditation to go with it so you can experience it yourself. And what we're doing is we're cleaving away part of the ego-mind identity every time we have the tangible experience of the self. Because once we taste that authenticity, nothing inauthentic will ever suffice. So we just have to start working what will seem like backwards. But I promise you, it is the only, you got to get in to get out. You have to go in to get out of this. And hopefully this book and all the other stuff is exactly the recipe to do that.
Oh, there's so much in there. And what I'm hearing is when you, it seems like ironic almost that you'll give up your wanting. And it's not even that you have it all. You just are it. You're everything. And it's like, the mind then does a whole nother backflip. For me, coming into the book, I'd been contemplating for the longest while that the highest desire, the desire of the highest order, was the desire of desirelessness. Like, how do I desire to desire nothing, right? Like, because then I'm trying to hack desire by folding desire in on itself, right? And just going, well, but even in that, I started to recognize that, and the book helped me really understand this much more further, which is you can already start to pick a hole in that argument here, because what's happening is desire, the way this God has architected our experience, is like the groove of desire runs really deep. Yeah, it's like, because it's desiring the experience of knowing thyself. It's like, so the desire goes all the way in. And yet here I am almost kind of trying to not desire or to desire nothing. And it kind of goes against the grain a little bit. And from there, 2 threads opened up in the book. And this is just a quick little example around this massive topic that started to shift for me, which was because it took me a long time to even come to this conversation around desirelessness. And the book just really quickly went, yes, and just start to feel the wave structure of how different acceptance feels to allowance. Yeah. And then we unpack allowance for desire. Blah. The floor is yours, Ajay.
Yeah, I mean, it's monumental, and a lot of times we spiritual buzzword acceptance, right? If we looked at acceptance, right, and obviously the book provides this, but we can do it now. So if we, even when we say the word acceptance, now my hands do this; they start to come together. Acceptance, and you can feel energetically what is actually happening. Acceptance is a collapsing and constriction of consciousness and energy. Let me say that again. Acceptance, which is the opposite of what is, because it's all one thing, right? Okay. So acceptance is the constriction and collapsing. So there's acceptance, and you can feel the energy, what's happening from chest to stomach when you say it. Now, when you say allowance. Now my hands, I know I talk with my hands, but my hands are naturally doing this when I say allowance. Now we can all do that, right? Allowance. You can feel the massive energetic difference between acceptance and allowance, right? So if you can allow, and also acceptance is the collapsing of the totality of possible possibilities into one reality, which therefore creates solidity and therefore resistance, which is also the opposite of what is, because there is no resistance. We create resistance through acceptance. Okay, so allowance does the opposite. What it's doing is it's opening us up to the infinite possible possibilities that are always available to us, and therefore we don't have to see anything or anyone in just one way. This will allow our growth, our evolution to accelerate. And we're no longer locking things into one, most likely discordant reality by creating solidity through the acceptance. And that solidity, therefore, creates resistance. And now we have created a reality that we don't even desire through acceptance. And again, this is the opposite of what we hear all day long, right? But the proof is there when we say acceptance. We can feel the energy do that. Allowance. We can feel the energy do this. This is what is. This is not what is.
Even
so
the
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just going to say, even because in there's a series of chapters there where you're helping us sort of work our way through certain malaligned pathologies of like behavior, and even just taking like anger as an example, right? Like I'm angry because something happened and it didn't go the way that I had planned, and so that's usually the hook. It's like I had hoped this would happen and it didn't happen, or this wasn't expected and it happened, and boom, anger shows up, right? And so in there, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, just accept. And this has happened so many times. It's like, just accept. And the minute I try to accept, I feel exactly what you're describing. Now there's language around it. It's like I'm trying to crystallize that happened, but I have to build a level of tolerance that bloody thing happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, when we step into allowance, I can feel like it's got nothing to do with me. Mm. That over there happened, noted, and I can allow that. And this is one of the metaphors that came through in the book around resilience, like time and time again, which I'm not sure how intentional it was to have in there. This oil and water metaphor that you had, like raise your frequency, ascend the frequencies. And the soup of everything is like, yeah, the oil and water get mixed up in time and time again, but just remember that you are you will rise to the surface. And even just having that in your mind, again, we were talking about cities before and the electromagnetic interference, just having that awareness actually helps you navigate with a level of resilience. And that, that holds a lot of container for allowance for things to, oh yeah, that happened. Sure, would have happened for a certain amount of it. It just gives you so much more context. Like you said, it doesn't crystallize, it doesn't collapse. So I just wanted to interject because it has such a profound impact in so many ways.
Yeah, we might be viewing, prior to reading the book or listening to it on Audible, we might have conceptualized, most likely, what this book would be like, right? What we find out by reading it or listening to it or both, that these teachings actually unlock us in ways that we don't even understand yet, because they're deep, deep, profound, supreme metaphysical truths, just like acceptance, allowance. Just these tiny things make this massive shift that are able to unlock us in terms of our resilience, our ability to overcome obstacles, our ability not to crystallize things and therefore create our own obstacle. We actually create the obstacle because we have the expectation. The expectation, any expectation, is always in context to some other attachment. And that attachment would have to be to some belief, some concept, some ideology, some role, some so-called knowledge, or some previous experience. All of those things are the past and not what is. So even the grandest of expectations is actually a limitation. Even the grandest expectations, because if it doesn't come in this grand form, we're going to miss all the infinite possible possibilities that this thing could manifest, because we have this expectation in this one direction. And then when that expectation doesn't get satiated, we then create our own inner turmoil. So by not adhering, having the expectations, just simply staying in the act of creating, simply staying in the act of creation, there's no way to even have an expectation. It's like, to me, expectation is cooking something in the oven, and every 30 seconds you open it up and take a look at it. It's like, is it cooking? Is it going? Is it right? I mean, that thing is never going to come out right because you have let me see. It's like, stop, don't just stay in this act of creation and remove the expectations, because the expectation is a limitation anyway. So it's a completely different way of operating and understanding ourselves. And that's why these are what I call the teachings of self-mastery, how to work at our highest levels in every single facet of our life. And that's what's most important to me, is that people use spirituality, the word's been hijacked. People use spirituality as, in general, something that they have to take time out of their day and do their spiritual practice, their meditation, their grounding, their whatever, right? If spirituality is not applicable in every single moment, within every single facet of your life, then what? It's useless. It's just it's the actor performing an action. It's the conditioned mind. This is the opposite. This is the breakthrough for humanity, to work in this way, where that never takes place anymore. You're actually the living embodiment of the higher consciousness, because you're so connected and in communion with the higher mind of the higher self. This is where all limitations are removed. This is the teachings that humanity is going to use for the next 300 years, and we can start using them now. And the difference it makes is immediate. It's tangible and it's immediate, because it's the truth. And simplicity is the height of sophistication. You're working with something that is masterful if it's direct, immediate, and tangible. It's not some circuitous route, and then you got to do this, and then you got to figure this out, and then you got to do this. And that's not mastery.
Yeah, when someone's overcomplicating things, usually I'm like, what are you selling?
Yeah.
And it's, just the infinite wisdom, timeless wisdom is always simple. Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. And one of the things I just wanted to sort of throw in there was, I've noticed in my coaching is, I like to ask this question. I was like, what are your greatest expectations in life, And then people share that back and I'm like, yep, cool. Now we know what to work on, because that's the place where you're going to be most depressed. And I literally, it's like expectation and depression are like a 1-for-1 as you just sub the word out. It's like, yeah. Okay. I'm conscious of how much time we have left. RJ, we've discussed this before. You were mentioning the word viewing. We've got different frequencies, different dimensions. I get the two. I did this last time, right? I interchanged the two, and maybe you can help me clarify it out. But the 13th is a bit of a viewing platform down upon the other 12 frequencies. Is it frequencies? Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
And then from there, 6th frequency and above is the space of the ascended masters. Now, yeah, sorry, feel free to correct me.
Yeah. So the ascended masters, they're a projection of their higher self, right? As everyone and everything is, right? You and me, we're a projection of the higher self. The ascended masters, the higher self for ascended masters, reside at the top of the 6th full dimension and up. And we are to have a incarnation. Our higher self must project us all the way down into the first full dimension, which are really 12 frequencies, with the 13th frequency being a viewing station. So
within the first dimension. So and how many dimensions are there? 12. So there's 12 dimensions, and then within the first dimension, there's 12 frequencies, correct?
Correct. 13, but 12 where the action is happening, I guess we could say.
Right. Yeah, right. And so we dive in deep to the first frequency within the first dimension to have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask why.
Right, yeah. Okay. Okay. Because the higher self, located in a much higher dimensional construct, has no frame of reference for what solidity, physicality, or thinking, or emoting, or touch, or taste, has no frame of reference for what that even is. None. Because once you're outside of the first full dimension, from a human perspective, everything is ephemeral. It's completely and utterly intangible. So for the higher self that's located way up here, for it to know, I'll use the octopus, right? So you got an octopus. For the octopus to find out what the water is like down here, it projects a tentacle down here so it can experience the water. It's just an image, right? But so the higher self is the octopus, which resides in much, much higher dimensions. And in reference to what you said, the ascended masters, they reside at the top of the sixth and the seventh, and then beyond, and then beyond that. So why do we come all the way down here? Well, one, because it's available. It's a possibility. And because we're immortal, we're going to avail ourselves of everything. And part of the directive to know thyself is to explore the minutia of everything, because we are everything. So we're gonna get projected all the way down here. What the first three frequencies of the first full dimension, because the energies are so heavy and dense, they come together and they need to support one another, and that's what creates this reality, or three-dimensional kind of reality that gives us height, weight, and width. So the bottom three frequencies come together to give us the experience that we're having. But there's a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. And seventh frequency is where, from a human perspective, there would be no negativity. There's no negativity. There's no ill will, because in that holistic realm, and therefore you need a holistic state of consciousness to operate in a much more holistic realm, you can't have any ill will towards something or someone else, because you tangibly realize that that's actually you as well. So the oneness is known. So, and that's the seventh frequency. That's when this is just, it must be experienced. Who cares how RG describes it? It must be experienced what that's like. But we are a long way from that. But those are the frequencies, and the first 12 frequencies are the physical universe. And once you're out of the first dimension, you can kind of pop what I describe it as. It's like, if you think of a balloon, that thin membrane, right, of the balloon itself. And when you can pierce that membrane, and you can leave the first full dimension, and there's this massive energetic shift. Like everything feels completely and utterly different. The lightness, the expansiveness, the finite mind isn't even there. It doesn't exist. You can't think, because you can't be in that state and have your finite mind. So it just disappears. It's just gone. But the higher selves of the ascended masters reside in much, much, much higher dimensions. And most of, there's always exceptions, but most of the incarnate souls that are inside a human vehicle and an alien or an alien vehicle are the top of the third full dimension, most of the fourth dimension, and then the bottom of the fifth. So that kind of sandwich right in there is where most of the higher selves that are projecting aspects of themselves, which would be everyone here, that's kind of where we're at. So when we say too that we're going to the fifth dimension, we're nowhere near the fifth dimension. We're in the first full dimension, because the energy exists in frequency. Energy doesn't exist dimensionally. Our phone is on a certain frequency, our television, the x-ray machine, just frequencies. Radio, frequency. It doesn't exist in a dimension. The dimension houses it. The dimensions house the construct. They are within that construct, and that's, we exist as an energy being moving through these different frequencies based upon how we're vibrating and what it is that we most desire to experience. And then the higher up, the higher self resides in the multiversal structure, is reflective of the level of sentience and the amount of energy. Sentience and energy is always in a one-to-one ratio. A pound of butter, a pound of sugar. So when sentience and energy are always 1-to-1, and the more sentient, the more energy, more power that we have as a creator, and that it determines where the higher self resides. And the key fob to the multiversal structure is sentience. So the wiser and more loving that you are, the more the higher self moves up and up and up within the multiversal structure. And that's what our incarnations are about. They are about our higher self evolving. We are just a tentacle of an octopus. We are learning, experiencing, and evolving on behalf of our higher self. And that way the higher self can move up within the multiversal structure.
Hey there, guys. Just taking a quick question out. This whole concept around the first frequency, second frequency, third frequency, and human beings are living in this 3 frequency, we call it 3D, but it's actually 3 frequency reality, and how those 3 frequencies live within like a 12 frequency band. And that 12 frequency band is the first dimension, and then there are 12 more dimensions. Oh, that is such a massive takeaway. I'd love to hear what you're taking away around that. Like, what are your insights and thoughts about that in the comments below? Back to the episode. Because I also want to ask the question from a frame of reference whereby your relationship with the Ascended Masters, because most people struggle to deal with even just their own pain in this third frequential reality. And thank you so much for clearing up that whole structure that we're getting to the 5th frequency and beyond, and calling it 5D is a bit of a significant misnomer. But in there, like, most people are struggling to navigate their own pain, and yet there's an invitation at the end of the book, which is not to be taken lightly, where it's like, feel free to give your pain to RJ. And your relationship with the Ascended Masters, and what do you feel you're here to do?
Well, I'm here to do exactly what I'm doing. I mean, this is it. I'm doing it. Whatever that doing is, but I'm doing it. I'm truly myself. I am myself, and I'm here to express and share my depth and amount of love and wisdom, and whose subsets are my talents and abilities, and to just keep emanating that, and to, in essence, to leave it here, if that makes sense, to just pour it out as much as possible without stopping. And my personal challenge, if anyone's interested in it, and you don't have to be, my personal challenge is I'm always trying to learn and develop a way to serve in an even greater way. And I'd like to try to give myself impossible tasks because I know I can do them. And in the ability to overcome these impossible tasks, I will serve as a living example that everyone can do it. So that's my goal, is to just give of myself as much as I can and challenge myself as much as I can and rise to the occasion, and then be a living example of what it's like to overcome impossible challenges, because we're going to realize that we can all do it. We absolutely all can do it. We've been brainwashed and conditioned to believe the opposite. But when we see someone doing the impossible, when we see someone unparalyzing themselves or accessing all this information or going to the depths of themselves, what's really being provided is a reflection. What's really being provided is a mirror for everyone else's self-realization and self-mastery, and to realize that all of us already are, we are now, and forever will be the embodiment of all of these truths. We're already it. And so many of us are just looking for a permission slip to be able to live that way and act that way and love that way and create the life that way. So I'm doing exactly what I set out to do. And if I just always feel that I wish I could do more. So I'll work on that, because quite frankly, I don't think I can do more, but it's still something within me is like more. So, yeah, I just want to do my best. I just want to serve in ways that stretch me to the utmost limit. Just when I think I can't go further, I'll find the resolve and the love within myself to go further.
And you're not afraid of humanity suffering?
This will be very controversial and quite upsetting. No one and nothing actually suffers. So let's go back to this immortal, whole, complete fractal of God that we are. It is untouched by all experience, just like the time-lapse camera. We are changeless throughout eternity. The only thing that is happening is that our depth of love and wisdom is accruing through perpetual experience. But what we are is untouched by everything. Is the time-lapse camera harmed by what it is that it witnesses? It is not. Now, what we suffer are our misperceptions, misunderstandings, and misidentifications. That is what we suffer. But those things are not what is, and those things are not what we are. So suffering is a temporary experience that we use for us to register our misalignment. So it's an extremely useful tool. Thoughts and emotions are actually messengers that we are out of alignment. So the body-mind definitely is affected by what goes on here. I was paralyzed. I was told I had 48 hours to live. Okay, so the body-mind is absolutely, right? We know this. The body-mind is absolutely affected by what goes on here, but we're not the body-mind. We're not the body-mind. We are untouched by everything that goes on here. Now, the key is to actually attune or align body-mind to the I am. And then you'll realize that this is just an experience and you don't have to suffer your way through it. You don't have to, because we've reached a point in our evolution, in our consciousness, Amrit, that we don't have to evolve through suffering anymore. We've played that game. We've run that gamut. We've done it. There's another way for us to evolve our consciousness, and that is what I want to provide for humanity, a completely different way for us to evolve ourselves, not through suffering, through accessing the higher mind, and just like these tenets, to move from disorder to order, right? To move from violence to kindness, right? Well, how do we do that? This is how we do it. So therefore, we're not stuck in duality, and we can simply move our way right through it. To be in the physical, but not of the physical. It's the exact same thing. I just like to explain everything and teach everything metaphysically, but it's the exact same thing.
The body-mind is a construct, is such a cool experience, because you invite us to just delete it, destroy it. I'm losing the words in here, but the meditations are like, just destroy it in your mind, just destroy it. And you're like, what? And you watch the part of you that's inflamed by such a suggestion. And then you're like, oh yeah. And that's all false self. And it's really cool to witness. And then, because one of the big subtext takeaways is, what is capital T truth? You can't destroy that, bro. That is, destroy everything you can, because that stuff is impenetrable. And that gave me this it had this real frequency of like Kali Shakti coming through, which was just like, bro, burn it all away, because anything that won't burn is actually the real truth. In there, we've discussed the 12 frequencies, which you helped clarify greatly. Thank you so much for that. And then the 12 dimensions. There's also a narrative arc that, is, and I think many of us can understand the waking up. We've got the false self you refer to in the book, and then we come home to a true self, which you refer to in a book, right? Capital T, and there's that burning, right? There's also this oneness, and you were mentioning in 7th frequency and above, things really start to get into this oneness state. But then there's also this no self, and I think a lot of us in the spirituality realm are starting to open up to oneness, but it seems like the journey goes into noneness. Whoa. Floor is yours, Ajay.
Yeah. So, and we can, let me bring that back to a sort of like a very tangible human thing, and then we can go back to it. So, many of us may have, whether this lifetime or another, have experienced an exalted state of consciousness, a blissed out state, right? Where the body is literally humming and vibrating in a different way. It's euphoric. We can actually feel the oneness, right? And so when this happens, many of us think, and that's just a thought, many of us think that, well, I've done it. I'm blissed out. I'm in this oneness. It's pure euphoria, pure love. It's like, I have done it. No, you haven't. That's the beginning. That's the absolute beginning. There are many, many levels within ourselves beyond enlightenment. Believe it or not, enlightenment is not a universal destination. It has to do with how sentient we actually are. I mean, there's self-realization, there's God realization, there's Elohim realization, and there's absolute realization, and there's something even beyond that. So there's all these different levels, but we often stop ourselves because there's there's an identification. Even at that point, there's some kind of identification with what is going on with the body, and because the body is feeling and humming and reacting in this way, we just think and associate that I've accomplished this ultimate state. You're at the starting line. If you ask me, you're at the starting line. So, and now what it looks like in terms of what you were just saying is the false self, ego, mind, identity, the false self, right? This is who we think we are, right? I'm a this and I'm a that. Well, no. I am is the only statement that is ever actually correct. Anything you put after I am is a temporary experience, and therefore that's proof that it's not you, because you are not temporary. You are immortal. So when you say I am something else, that's actually what you're not. So we go from false self to the true self, to who and what we really are, right? Now, we could kind of say that's when we start to approach what I would call self-realization or enlightenment, which are the same thing, which is full communion with the higher self. Okay. Now, what's past that is the one self. So when we start to see ourself in everything and in everyone, that is the oneness. Now we no longer see anything or anyone as others or outside of this one self that sees through all eyes. But the next level beyond that is no self. There's no self at all. Just not, now, to try to put words to that, I probably tried to put words to that in the book. I don't even remember if I did or not, to be honest. But that is sort of the next level, that there is no self. It's not even a once. There's no self at all. And that's kind of like the wellspring of being and non-being. You're literally at the 0 point. You're literally at the source point. There is no self. There's no self at all. There's just this feeling of infinite possibility. Just this feeling of infinite possibility, but there isn't a self that's experiencing it. So it's right. We have to, it doesn't matter what, we have to experience these things, which is why I have the meditations in there. But yeah, there's the false self, true self, one self, and no self. And that's what I want to share and then teach, so everyone can experience that themselves.
RJ, I'm going to put a copy to the book in the description below, along with the other two as well. Each book, as you said, written very prescriptively. It's very tangible. I'm conscious, we've explored many big themes and arcs in here today, but, even just let the periscope metaphor be one that, people take away. There's 24 like that, which really ground in and just a very tangible experience. Like, I'm hoping people can feel in and just go, oh yeah, like I just empty this awareness of kind of going, oh yeah, this is actually the empty part. It feels very full, but it's all noise from the EMI, electromagnetic interference. Oh, sorry, ego, mind, identity. That's all just noise, right? And if I'm actually centered between my heart and my root, and somewhere in there is this real center for this true self, and I'm just this observing station. That's just one example out of 24 that the book invites you to go on this journey with. And it's an incredible book. You said this to me when you offered up a copy to me. I was like, I don't think there's ever been anything quite like this, and I would have to attest to agree. In the journey of researching podcasts, I read a lot, and yeah, it's practical, it's vast, and practical, which is I don't know how you do it, but I'm really grateful for it. A link to it will be in the description below. As always, brother, thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly, so openly. Like, even just me being able to ask you your personal questions on, where you see yourself in it all, and just the generosity and the humility with which you are always just sharing so much of yourself here with the Inspired Evolution tribe and audience and myself. Brother, I'm grateful for you, but even that sort of feels like it's not quite enough. Thank you so much, RJ. Like, it's been such a treat and a pleasure, brother. Like, so much love for you.
Those are very kind words, and I really, really appreciate it. Those kind words say a lot more about you than they do about me. But I want you to know I appreciate it very much, and it's always a lot of fun to interact with you. And I look forward to when we do it next time, Amrit.
Thank you so much.
That was pretty powerful. That really was. I mean, I could feel it too. I got totally carried away and taken away. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to actually watching it.
Oh.
And I don't say that. I mean, I do all these interviews, blah, blah. I don't say that often. I actually am I'm actually looking forward to watching this, because I think we reached some kind of, I don't even know. It just felt very elevated. It felt very elevated, and I'm very excited about it. So thank you.
It means so much to me that these episodes mean so much to you, brother. It means a lot to me. It really does. There was a couple of things that I didn't get to explore with you, which was actually what I was really hoping to dive in at the beginning of the podcast, and maybe there's a whole nother conversation yet to come, if you're open to it. I know I keep sort of booking you in 6-month intervals now, it seems like, but there's this really interesting story arc about the lost years of Jesus, why we're not talking about him, what happened in India. He went to Egypt. Joseph was there with him. That's so interesting. I want to have a whole conversation about that. And I was like, wait, like there'll be an opportune moment in the podcast, but the podcast was just, like you said, the transmission and the current was just so, like it knew what it wanted to avail today. And I was just, I was here, and it was incredible to partake in. But I'd love to explore some of that stuff as well, if you're open to it.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating for sure.
Perfect.
All right, my friend.
Inspired soul, you've made it through to the end of another incredible episode. Now on screen, I'm about to pop up a couple of episodes with RJ. One of them describes his own healing journey. He was paralyzed, and he could not walk, could not move, and he healed himself. And he runs us through how he actually manages to do that. We've had other conversations with him before about oversouls and the different types of archetypes that are available in those spaces. It's really incredible feeling into the ascended masters. And the different types of ascended masters that there are. Now, those episodes are about to pop up on screen, but just before they do, I want to take a moment to just remind you that everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the podcast, to the channel. To all of you that are subscribed, my sincerest heartfelt thanks. Your incredible love and support is just everything. It is the lifeblood of the channel. And to those of you that are new to the channel or watching for a second or third or fourth time that potentially haven't subscribed, please do take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Like I said, it powers and empowers everything around here. Now, without too much further ado, on screen, episodes with RJ and other episode from the Inspired Evolution to take your journey further, to stay inspired, keep evolving. I'm looking forward to seeing you in that one. See you there.